On the eve of the G20 meeting, European leaders told Greece in no uncertain terms, vote against the EU bailout and you're on your own, out of the eurozone. Bill White is with us this morning. He's chairman of the OECD's Economic and Development Review Committee, someone very familiar with what's taking place in Europe and the tensions. Bill, you're in Basel, Switzerland, not that far away from Cannes, and certainly you can see what's happening from Greece all the way to France. Is this, in your opinion, the beginning of the end for the eurozone, this threat by Papandreou to hold a vote and the response by Sarkozy and Merkel?
Well, I certainly don't think it's the end of the eurozone. The first thing to keep in mind is that Greece is very small. And if Greece were to default or to leave the eurozone tomorrow, in principle, not a very great deal need happen. The question is, what's going to happen to all the other countries, and will they be following the kind of policies that are required in order to meet the requirements for staying inside the euro area? And I think they will.
You do? You don't think that this is an existential crisis? Because if Greece were to walk out the door and people were to see what might happen to Greece in terms of a devaluation and what impact that might have on the economy, you don't think that Portugal and Ireland and Spain would perhaps consider taking the same step?
Well, I think the question is what the markets would do. Now, the markets might take fright, and that is entirely possible. But I guess what I would say on the basis of what I know about what's happening in Ireland and in Portugal and in Spain, in terms of trying to turn their fiscal position around and their structural competitiveness around, these countries are a million miles away from Greece. Greece is really a standalone kind of problem if people look very, very carefully at the numbers and what's being done.
But isn't that partly, Bill, because Angela Merkel and Germany's power within the EU has effectively been like a boot on the throats of these peripheral countries? If they were to see an alternative and the markets were to push them in that direction, to your point, why wouldn't they be incentivized to take it?
Well, the fact of the matter is that any country that decides to leave the eurozone or that thinks very seriously about leaving the eurozone is going to expose itself to enormous costs. The first concern, of course, would be that there would be a kind of capital run on the individual on the individual country, because everybody would know that the purpose of the exercise of leaving the euro area would be to devalue. And so this would be a huge problem right up front, which I think in the limit would lead to the bankruptcy of the banking system, in some cases the corporate system. It's just very costly for countries to do that. And I think these are precisely the arguments that Prime Minister Papandreou is going to be making to the Greek people over the course of the next few days. That option is really the expensive option, and it's one that they should not follow.
Well, it's clearly one that the rest of the EU does not want anyone to follow. But what does this say about the credibility of Angela Merkel, Sarkozy, Jean-Claude Juncker, all of the other officials involved? They have been telling us for months, Bill, that membership in the eurozone was irrevocable. It was irrevocable until last night, when all of a sudden it's okay to go.
Well, legally speaking, it is irrevocable. The Greeks can decide for themselves to exercise sovereign power and leave, but if they do so, they will be doing so illegally. And I think this is something that everybody has really wanted to try to avoid. Now, you used the word an existential crisis. What I'm rather hoping here is that both in the context of Europe and the G20, that the creditors and the debtors will come to realize that they are irrevocably joined at the hip, and that they've got to start trying to do some deals that will be in everybody's best interests. That the kicking the can down the road has gone on long enough, and now is the time for resolute action. And in the European case, what I think that means is a commitment to a stronger European fiscal control mechanism, albeit democratically controlled somehow, and in addition a commitment to major structural reform. And if they can get that out and they can convince people, we'll be in much better shape, I think, perhaps even because of the crisis.
Bill, good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Bill White of the OECD.